Today, we're going to break down the complex and honestly tragic story behind one of the biggest crises in modern aviation history, the Boeing 737 MAX.
And it all starts with this number, 346. Now, this isn't a stock price. It's not a flight number. It's the number of people who lost their lives.
So, that's the central question, right? How does something like this even happen? We're going to peel back the layers on this one, from the corporate boardroom right down to the cockpit, to see how a chain of decisions led to an absolutely unimaginable tragedy.
To get our heads around this, we're not going to start at the beginning. We're going to start right in the middle of the chaos, with two plane crashes that were just chillingly similar.
Okay, look at how quickly this all unfolds. October 2018, the Lion Air flight goes down. A horrible tragedy. But Boeing and the FAA, the regulators, they come out and say, hey, the plane is safe. But then, just 5 months later, it happens again. And only then, after the second crash, does the entire world ground the fleet. That's what kicked off this massive investigation.
But to really, truly understand what went wrong here, we have to rewind the clock. Because this wasn't just some random engineering mistake. Nope. It all started with a high-stakes business decision made years before the first plane even left the ground.
So here's the deal. Boeing's biggest rival, Airbus, comes out with this new, super fuel-efficient plane, and airlines are lining up for it. Boeing is feeling the heat, big time, and they have a choice to make. Option 1, take 10 years, spend billions, and design a brand new plane from scratch. Or Option 2, take their classic, 50-year-old 737 design and just update it. Fast, cheap. They went with Option 2, and that decision, it was the first domino to fall in what became a fatal chain reaction. Okay, so this is where it gets really crucial. That decision to just update an old plane, well, it created a brand new, deadly problem. And in a wild twist of irony, the software they wrote to fix that problem, that became the very thing that caused the disasters.
You see, to compete with Airbus, Boeing had to use these much bigger, more efficient engines. But the 737 sits really low to the ground, so they had to stick the engines a little higher and further forward on the wings. Well, that tiny change completely messed with the plane's aerodynamics. It created this dangerous tendency for the nose of the plane to pitch up on its own. They had to fix it.
And that fix was a piece of software called MCAS. Its only job was to automatically, and get this, secretly, push the plane's nose back down if it thought it was pitching up too high. The most critical part? They intentionally left it out of the pilot manuals. Why? To avoid triggering the need for expensive pilot retraining. And this secrecy, this single decision, created a terrifying death loop that the pilots couldn't escape.
This right here is the trap. In both crashes, a single broken sensor started feeding MCAS bad information. The software thought the plane was in trouble when it was flying perfectly fine. So MCAS kicks in, pushing the nose down. The pilots, confused, do what they're trained to do. They fight it. They pull the nose back up. But MCAS, still listening to that one faulty sensor, just overpowers them and does it again, and again, and again. It was a deadly tug of war, and the pilots never stood a chance because they didn't even know they were fighting a piece of software.
A flawed design is one thing, but what investigators uncovered next was frankly much more disturbing. This wasn't just an accident. It was a deliberate corporate culture of hiding the truth from the very people who needed it most, the pilots and the safety regulators. So this was the public line from Boeing, over and over again. The MAX is safe, no extra simulator training needed. That was a huge selling point for the airlines. It saved them a ton of money. But behind the scenes, inside the company, a completely different and terrifying story was unfolding.
Investigators found these absolutely stunning internal messages. Just listen to this one from a Boeing employee. This is a design that is egregious. It is horrific. They knew. People inside Boeing knew how dangerous this system was long before those planes ever fell from the sky.
And this one gets right to the heart of the scandal. I basically lied to the regulators. See, Boeing actively downplayed how powerful MCAS was to the FAA, the agency that's supposed to ensure planes are safe. And they did it for one reason, to make sure the FAA wouldn't require that costly, time-consuming new pilot training.
This whole mess exposed this huge systemic problem called regulatory capture. It's what happens when the watchdog, in this case the FAA, gets way too cozy with the company it's supposed to be watching. The FAA had actually outsourced huge parts of the safety certification to Boeing.
So, in effect, Boeing was grading its own homework. It was a total breakdown of the system. So, after that second crash, the truth just couldn't be contained anymore. The planes were grounded, and the reckoning for what was once America's most respected engineering company, well, it was catastrophic.
For 20 months, let that sink in, that's almost 2 years, every single 737 MAX in the world was parked on the tarmac. It was the longest grounding of an aircraft in modern history. Period.
And then the penalties started rolling in. Boeing was forced to pay $2.5 billion to settle criminal fraud charges with the U.S. Department of Justice for deceiving the regulators.
But the total hit? It was way, way bigger. When you add up the fines, the compensation to airlines and victims' families, all the lost orders, the total cost to Boeing ballooned to over $20 billion. Just a staggering figure.
And the money was just part of it. The CEO got fired. Congress held these brutal public hearings, exposing what they called a culture of concealment. Global trust in the FAA was shattered, and investigators started pointing fingers at a 1997 merger that, they said, shifted the company's focus from engineering excellence to just pure shareholder value. Boeing's 103-year-old reputation was left in tatters.
You know, this whole thing leaves us with this really critical question about corporate culture. There's this constant battle in almost every industry, right? The pull between doing what's safe and what's right versus doing what's profitable. The 737 MAX story is just a brutal reminder of the human cost when that balance gets lost.
And finally, it forces all of us to ask some hard questions about the very system designed to keep us safe when we fly. Should a company like Boeing be allowed to certify its own work? That debate about regulatory oversight is more urgent today than ever before, and the lessons from this tragedy are still shaping the future of aviation.